This video is brought to you by Alienware, featuring Intel Core i7 processors. Start gaming.
So with DICE outing all of the information for They Shall Not Pass the other day, I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to try and fill in the blanks a little bit. One of the few things that they didn't detail was the list of infantry weapons that are due to be added. Now, 20 new weapons are set to come out across the 4 paid DLCs that DICE are making for Battlefield 1, and 5 of those are due to be coming with the introduction of the French army in March. I've done some videos in the past of lots of different weapons that DICE should add into the game, but considering this first DLC is all about the French, today we're going to be looking at 5 weapons that DICE are likely to pick. Just before I carry on, this video is sponsored by Alienware, and all of the gameplay is coming from their brand new AW15 laptop that they've sent to me. It's equipped with a 6th generation i7 processor, 16GB of RAM, a full desktop GTX 1060 graphics card, and the party piece, a 120Hz display. This laptop is a real powerhouse. If you want to check this thing out, there's a link down in the description that will take you to the Alienware website, and there's also a link down there to my review of the unit as well. Right then, first weapon on the list, the Chauchat Machine Gun. And this is one I think that's a pretty obvious inclusion. Not only because it was the standard issue French machine gun during World War I, but the soldier in the artwork for the French army is holding one. So I think we can be pretty confident this will be in the DLC. The Chauchat was designed back in 1903, and it entered service into the French army in 1908. It saw extensive use during the war with the French and the American and Belgian forces as well. The French version, the original, chambered for the 8mm Lebel round, was notoriously unreliable. The American version, adapted to use the 30-06 Springfield round, was fundamentally flawed, but the Belgian variant, chambered for the 7.65 Mauser round, didn't seem to have any of the issues that the other two had, and it stayed in service with them until the 1930s. It was an extremely slow-firing weapon, reaching only 240 rounds per minute or so, and with a 20-round magazine, stopping power really wasn't its strong suit. Efficiency wasn't on the list of pros for the Chauchat either. Its design had been simplified to accelerate production, and that meant its weaknesses really became exposed. The muddy trench conditions on the front lines meant the open-sided magazines containing the rounds filled with rubble and mud, causing the guns to jam, and the gun would refuse to operate once it overheated, and it had to cool down on its own before any of the parts would move. Yikes. It'll be interesting to see how DICE balance this one with such a low rate of fire and magazine capacity. Maybe they'll give it higher bullet damage as a compensation for that, who knows? But I think we can be pretty confident DICE will be adding this one into the game. The second weapon on the list, and I'm pretty confident of this one as well, the Lebel rifle. This again was the standard issue French rifle during World War I, and it was designed all the way back in 1886. Roughly 3.5 million of the rifles were manufactured from that point onwards when the first orders were placed, all the way through to mid-1916, halfway through World War I. It was fed via an 8-round magazine, and it could also hold 1 round in the transporter and 1 in the chamber. Interesting fact here, before the First World War, the Germans resisted calls from their own government to go to war with France due to the fact that their own rifles were vastly inferior to what the French had created. Now, the Lebel was the first military firearm to use smokeless powder ammunition, and it could fire almost twice as fast as the then standard German Mauser M1917. So in response, the Germans created the Gewehr 88 and the Gewehr 98 rifles, rivaling and in many cases bettering the Lebel rifle. By the time the war broke out, the French were in the process of trying to overtake other empires again in designing a new, improved weapon, but with the war pulling all resources away into fighting the Germans, they had no choice but to continue with their Lebel rifle as the standard issue. It was joined by the Berthier family of weapons as well, but most of those were distributed to the French colonies, and the Lebel was reserved for mainland French soldiers. With the weapon being able to hold effectively 10 rounds, I could see this rifle being balanced in a similar way to the Lee Enfield. But with the sweet spot mechanic not being hugely popular with players, and there not being too many gaps of where the Lebel could actually fit, perhaps DICE will go down the route of the Gewehr M95 and use the older weapon damage model from previous games. That's something I'd like to see anyway. That was number 2 on the list. Weapon number 3 is the RSC M1917. Now this is a semi-automatic rifle and it would fit right in with the medic class in Battlefield 1. It uses the same 8mm round found in the Lebel rifle and the Chauchat MG, and it was issued to a small group of French soldiers on the Western Front in late 1918. After the war, production stopped completely. The 1917 was actually originally designed to be a straight replacement of the Lebel rifle. As I mentioned in the Lebel section, France were trying to create a weapon that would outrun its rivals and put them back in the driving seat again. And to make things even easier, it used several parts already existing in the Lebel rifle, and that made it easier to produce, and by November 1918, some 80,000 or so had been sent to the front lines in France. Now, despite its advantages over bolt-action rifles in terms of fire rate, apparently French soldiers didn't really like this weapon very much. It was too heavy, it was too large, and it was very cumbersome to use down in the trenches. Most of the medic weapons in Battlefield 1 also have some sort of automatic function, and the RSC doesn't appear to have that, so this weapon could be balanced in the same way as the Mondragon and the Selbstlader 1916. The weapon is only fed though by a 5-round en-bloc clip into an internal magazine, so you've only got 5 rounds and then you're done. I guess we'll need to wait and see how DICE choose to balance this. Weapon number 4 on the list, and this is for the assault class. This is the Ribeyrolles SMG, or to give you its full name, the Chauchat Ribeyrolles 1918 Submachine Gun. A little bit of a mouthful, that one. This weapon can really be considered as a prototype. It was really only tested during the later years of the war, but as I'm sure you can see from the picture, it appears to borrow heavily from the Chauchat MG. In 1918, the same company who made the RSC M1917, as I mentioned above, and the Chauchat MG, came up with this design, and its intended use was for close-range protection of tank crews. Now, it uses a similar mechanism to the RSC M1917, but it's adopted that iconic Chauchat MG magazine, and by the end of testing, it was actually using the exact same magazine as the machine gun. The tests of the SMG proved successful, and the weapon did indeed work, but its use case, protecting tank crews, didn't really warrant the power that the weapon possessed. Now, during training to control its power, French soldiers loaded the magazines with standard and tracer ammunition so they could keep track of where the rounds were going. Now, I think this would be a perfect fit for the assault class, considering we already have the Hellriegel, which was another SMG that never made it out of testing, the Automatico, which was a weapon only adopted in 1918, and the MP18 given to the German stormtroopers in their 1918 spring offensive. The Ribeyrolles would have a 20-round magazine, the same as the Chauchat MG, but there are no details on its rate of fire, so perhaps DICE could think of something to blend that in with. And finally, weapon number 5 on the list. I've gone with a pistol here to round out everything we've been talking about. This is the Ruby pistol. It's a pistol designed by the Spanish prior to World War I, and they had the Americans in mind when they were making it. Now, a distinguishing feature, it held more bullets than many other small arms at the time, a 9-round magazine in comparison to the 6 or 7 that most other handguns used, and the round was rather different to most of those that were available in Europe at the time. It used the 32 ACP round. In 1915, the developers of the weapon sent examples to the French government, who at the time were struggling to secure enough arms to continue supplying their troops on the Western Front. In May that same year, the French put in their first order for 10,000 rubies to be made every single month, and eventually they upped their order to 50,000 a month by September. As the war progressed, so many of the ruby pistols were being made that the Spanish designers offloaded production to many different contractors, and unfortunately that led to discrepancies in the design, and many parts of different ruby pistols wouldn't work with each other. That led to confusion on the front line, and eventually other pistols started to be used by the French forces. I'd assume that DICE would make a DLC pistol, an all-kit one, so that any of the French-class soldiers can go and run with it if they want to. There are several other weapons the French used as sidearms during the war, but this one seemed to be the most popular. And there we go, 5 weapons that DICE might try and add to the They Shall Not Pass DLC. Now, I could be completely wrong, and they're going to find loads of prototype weapons that the French made during the war and put those in instead, but I think it's highly likely that they will put some iconic weapons in there as well. Let me know what you think of these suggestions down below. Anything you think I might have forgotten, leave me a comment and I'll try and read as many as I can. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out the Alienware AW15 laptop either. Links to their website are down in the description. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.